Thank you. I do want to start by saying there is a page in the notebook that looks like a cycle. It's called the atrophy cycle. We're going to get to that later, so if you want to take any notes or some of the quotes that I'll be putting up, you can take them on the back or wherever you'd like. So just logistically there. Also, some of you that have been in this space with me before, as I'm telling stories or talking about any of these things, if you feel like you can relate to what I'm saying, it resonates with something deep inside you, in that moment, just raise your hand in the air and then just bring it back down. And that will just be a sign to others. It's a way to take 120 people and make it a little more intimate and a little more empathic in that space. So if we can do that, that would be great. I'd appreciate that. All right, so irreconcilable differences, New Testament tensions, and our own. Dick has asked me to reconcile the entire Bible in these next 45 minutes, pulling it together so that you are centered, you have it together, and it's kind of a piece of cake. You got it. Is that right, Dick? That was it. Okay. So we certainly have been given and gotten wonderful, extensive view this morning, what it was like in New Testament times, certainly a glimpse into that space and the tension that might be there. The bottom line for me is we're actually not being asked to choose one or the other. Is that what Jesus' message is? What's he asking? Is he asking us to choose? What's he asking us? Seems to me we're being asked to surrender to the divine and to get in touch with what does that mean? What does that mean? In a self-disciplined way, maybe in a way that we drop judgments? To leave all for Christ? Again, what does that mean? To develop a direct, communicative relationship with the divine? From my perspective, the point of the human experience is not to figure it out. If we kind of put that on hold, we might open up huge spaces in our life. Why did she say that? Why did Dick do that? Why did they serve that again? Or whatever. It's not to figure all this out. It's to let it be. And to wake up and realize that the human experience and nothing in it defines you. You get to define it, the human experience, as a classroom and maybe even a field for awakening. Just think about what that might mean. So as you're letting it be, what we can do is we can develop a natural compassion and wisdom, such that perhaps some of the suffering may be relieved, and you and others may actually be inspired to wake up to the glory of oneness. How many of you have heard or read or read Pema Chodron? Does that ring a bell with anybody? Half a dozen or so. Okay, maybe a few more. She is a well-known author. She's written about 10 or 12 books. She's a Buddhist monk, lives in Nova Scotia. Amazing woman. And she's especially known for helping people in really tough times, people that are really struggling with big issues, whether they're life-threatening issues or divorce or traumatic things they've been through. And the first quote that I'd like to share is from her book that's called When Things Fall Apart, Heart Advice in Difficult Times. So see if you can breathe into and relate to this. Things falling apart is a kind of testing and also a kind of healing. We think that the point is to pass the test or to overcome the problem. But the truth is that things, in the human experience, things don't really get solved. They come together again, and go figure, they fall apart again. Think of political regimes, think of relationships, think of things get better, and then what's up with that? I thought we fixed that. So it's just like that. So the healing comes from letting there be room for all this to happen. Instead of spending 90 hours a day trying to fix everything, we let it happen. There's room for grief, for relief, for misery, for joy. The human experience, it's just a passing experience, like a movie. You're not a character in that movie. It's just a movie you're watching. So it's not about being convinced that one way is better than the other, or one part of the movie is better than the other, or more right. That's a distraction. It's about letting people's experience be what it is. Give them the space to grow. This is what human consciousness needs to work through at this point, until it doesn't. Mildly interesting, but not the point. This perspective aligns with what Dick touched on last night in this integral approach, because this integral approach to thinking and spirituality is creating a space and an appreciation for more than one perspective existing and blessing at the same time. It's okay. We got roses and we got lilies, and it's okay. You may have a preference. Awesome. But we got them both. We're not being asked to form opinions, to take sides, to make judgments. We're just being asked to consider the lilies and the roses. Just to appreciate, to love, to see the wholeness in each person, no matter what their perspective is. And to put our conditioned mind maybe in the back seat and let our authentic heart drive. The prophet Jeremiah shares with us what he heard from the divine. I will give them singleness of heart and action. How cool is that? We could just stop, let's go to lunch now. Just singleness of heart and action, so that they will always fear me, and that all will then go well for them and for their children after them. Is that not one of our deepest prayers? Singleness of heart, so that all will go well. Isn't this all what we really want? Just let's breathe that in. There can be pretty strong feelings over these religious issues, to say the least. They can and do cause personal, national, international wars. What I'd like to do is offer you something for the heart space right now, which is a song that we're going to play here. Tomorrow we'll have Lola singing a song for you, but today this is a recorded one. It's a group called Cry, Cry, Cry. You may have heard of them, maybe not. But I'm offering this because I feel like goes right to the heart, and it's at this issue of this sort of passionate, sanctimonious disagreement. So let's create a space for this. You might even want to think of someone, I won't make an assumption here, but if you have any tension in your life, in any relationships, and if that's not relevant, you can raise, if it is relevant, you can raise your hand. If not, I can share some with me, some of mine, but just open to that space, and let's play it, John. Thanks. I'll just hit the little buttons as we go. So do you remember? Are we remembering that each of us is just as connected to the divine as everyone else is? Can you bless them on their path? Again, what really matters to you? Do you have a single necessity? It's way too easy to get the mind all caught up and distracted by who's right, who's wrong, who should be greatest. Jesus' disciples certainly got distracted by that as well. Do you remember Jesus' response when they asked him that? Who shall be greatest? Become as a little child. Wow. Simplicity, innocence. Here's what Mary Baker Eddy wrote about the role of Jesus in her autobiography. One of the things. She says, in this simplicity and with such fidelity, we see Jesus ministering to the spiritual needs of all who place themselves under his care, always leading them into the divine order. Is our minds and hearts single? Is there a simplicity and an innocence and a fidelity to God's will? Are we listening for that divine order? I think of these issues, the back and forth issues, I'd call them caterpillar issues. To me, they're mostly involved in just the horizontal dimension. It's just the human mind having a field day. It's just distracted. To the degree that you're following the divine order, your focus is on your own transformation and spiritual awakening, and you're allowing human experience to happen, but you're allowing yourself to be governed by this divine order. This is what we're going to be opening up these 3 days. You may have a preference about whether you'd like your church to be more exclusive or inclusive, but it's not going to keep you up at night. You may have a preference for the kind of car you drive or the restaurant you like, but they don't get in the way of your relationship with God or with your neighbor. In other words, our preferences don't define us. They don't interfere with our ability to love yourself, and to love others unconditionally, without conditions. Not I like you because. And they don't interfere with your ability to have just a straightforward relationship with the divine, with God, a communicative interaction. Here's another way to illustrate it. If I wanted to get to the back of the auditorium, then there's several ways I could do it, but the straightest way would be to find the center aisle, and then I would get there most directly as I walked. There are other options, especially for some of my buddies here. I could go out and hang with Mindy over here, or Jeannie, and I could say, hey, how you doing? It's great to see you. You know, I know I'm late for lunch, but that's okay. And Chestnut, my buddy over here, she only lives 9 miles away, but there's a little tension because she lives on a golf course and doesn't have me over to go golfing. Yeah, funny to you. You know, my game is not doing too well. And so I could sort of get there, and I could go this way, and then I could, hey, Chuck, what's up, man? Good to see you. All right, good. I could sort of, got anything to drink? You know, and just, eventually I'd get there. But I'm a little distracted by these sways and these back and forths of all these things that are very intriguing to my human thinking. It's an order. Eddie might call it the lower order. She contrasts the lower order with the higher order. And on the way, there could be a little tension that could develop. You could upset a few people. There could be some anxiousness. I'm not getting there quick enough. Or you guys want me to get there and I'm not there. And at this age, I'm supposed to be there. Or whatever is going on there. And I'm not making the case for mediocrity here. I'm making the case for finding your center and yielding to the divine order as you hear it. Not as somebody else tells you the way it should be. Think about how taxing the tension, I don't know if you've experienced this, but the tension in relationships could be. Anybody ever had a relationship just with a little bit of tension? Okay. Have you ever been in a relationship where, usually it's obviously your tension because the other person is not acting the way that you think they should. And then you found a way, possibly, to trust that they're actually listening to their angels. This is you finding the center aisle for you. All the energy can go into that space versus this and that, and I got to change them, and I got to lift that one and carry that one. I'm ignoring that one, so I can't go. Instead of all that activity, I'm appreciating and I'm listening. Think of the energy and the life force that can be present when we open to that space, this heart space that leads us. And we may stop here and there, but it's not really our choice. There's certain towns that Jesus didn't go into because they weren't receptive, but it wasn't like he's going, man, those guys are losers. He's just walking in the aisle as he's taught to walk. And then somebody wrote later, well, clearly didn't go there because, but it's not walking around with all this judgment going on. So my primary focus with you all this week in these 3 talks and in the breakout is to focus in the space of unlearning through illustrating what I might call the conditioned minds, some of the pitfalls that keep us off center, that keep us out of this aisle, that create limiting relationships with God or ourselves. Because when that's released, the pure, simple truth of walking this way is revealed to each of us in our own way. This is not from my perspective, this is not kind of a sort of partial kind of part-time commitment or devotion. You're either in or you aren't in. Here's the way in Ephesians that Paul put it, one way. Everything, this is from the Message Bible, everything, and I do mean everything in case you didn't get it the first time, connected with that old way of life has to go. Couldn't he have said most things or some of the things except Alexis, or whatever, It's rotten through and through. Get rid of it. And then take on an entirely new way of life. A God-fashioned way. The divine order. The higher order. Eddie talks about the higher order, the primal order, the natural order, the divine order. Fascinating concordance study in those all-around order and contrasting it with the lower order. So this higher order, this God-fashioned way of life is a life that is renewed from the inside and working itself into our conduct. It's not a head thing. As God accurately reproduces his character in you. That's the center aisle here. Opening and yielding to that space. This to me is grace. Sometimes I'll use grace, capital G, to mean another name that points to the divine, but we'll also use grace the way Dick defined it there, which to me is really the divine influence in the heart the authentic heart made present and available here and now, hitting the street. Love hitting the street. So grace, we can experience grace sort of as gentle grace, which we love, or fierce grace, which we may not love as much. Gentle grace could be defined in this way. God's relentless affection celebrating everyone. This is the sweet, tender presence of the divine arriving on the wings of angels. This is what we're all seeking. This is how we kind of picture heaven, I think. We've all felt this transforming experience. But there's also fierce grace. Fierce grace runs counter to the ego and the conditioned mind, which is why it feels difficult or fierce. It's because of where we're hanging out. It's disruptive. Fierce describes what it takes on our part to open to it. You don't just look at a can of soda and say, okay, open, I'll just stroke you. You actually have to pry and pop and things happen. So fierce describes what it takes on our part to open it, and also how the letting go of cherished, outgrown positions and attachments can feel. Can feel a little fierce. Helen's going to talk to us about the Gospel of Thomas, which I am super excited about to get in more depth, but I've got a few ideas here that I picked from it that to me are very relevant here. And Jesus said, I shall give you what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, and what no hand has touched. Think about that for a second. See if you can find how that might be fierce. Especially when he adds, and what has never occurred to the human mind. Can you find the fierceness there? To me, he's saying, if you follow him, we need to turn from, this is everything. This is Paul saying everything in the old way of life. If you follow him, we need to turn from what we've seen, from what we've heard, from what we've even felt, and all the beliefs that we've created from that foundation. All that's familiar in those realms. And even more amazingly, he's asking us to consider what has never even occurred to the human mind. Completely moving into the unknown. Everything, as Paul says, connected to the old way of life. You may know the Gospel of Thomas has numbers after it, so that's if you're going to look it up. You can just write down the number, and then you can Google it, and you can find exactly where these are if you need it. But so here's a definition of fierce grace. It might be a little fierce. God's relentless affection, crucifying ego. Ouch. I hate it when that happens, when I think I am my ego, which is pretty often. Again, here's Pema Chodron, same woman I mentioned before. Fierce grace, straight up. She doesn't hide. Only to the extent that we expose ourselves over and over to annihilation can that which is indestructible be found in us. I won't have you sit with that too long in case you get indigestion, but see if you can find it. The only things that can be annihilated are those things which are temporal. When you're exposed to death, you are left with that which has never been touched by it. Fierce grace gets you in touch with your center, with the indestructible and eternal. Again, from the Gospel of Thomas, see if you can find it. Many are standing at the door. but it is the solitary who will enter the bridal chamber. Are you focused on many beings, many opinions, many perspectives that trying to right and wrong them all? Are you convicted in dualistic feelings or in non-dualism about church members? Is there any tension there? If there's tension, it's dualistic. Are you many? Are you legion? Or are you solitary? Whatever does not get into the bridal chamber to be wedded with Christ gets left out and annihilated. It's not eternal. Here's how we find the idea of oneness in the book of John. Very familiar with this, that they all may be one, as you, Father, are in me, and I in you, that they also may be one in us. Obviously, this can be very challenging, but let's look at Thomas once more here. Jesus said, "Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds." So, like in Luke 15, are we willing to seek, to light the candle, to sweep the house, and to seek diligently until we find that lost piece of silver? But here's, Thomas always adds a little, guess what happens when we find? We become troubled. Can you find that? Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever humbly sought and what you found is not exactly what you expected? Annihilation troubles the human mind. So we don't find what we expect, even though we're seeking and diligently looking and seeking, it can be troubling. Certainly to the ego and the conditioned mind, to our sense of self. But if we stay with it, what happens? Well, when we become troubled, we then will become astonished because it's so much bigger than we ever imagined. The glory of the divine is way beyond what the human mind could ever imagine. And then the gift, he will rule over all. We have dominion through this love. No fear. Drops away. So we're blessed with this deeper sense of dominion. There's less swerving on the path. We stay with our center. Here's how Thomas More, a current author, wrote in a poem called "The Dark Night of the Soul." The dark night of the soul, so the willingness to be troubled, to go into this space, it's a profoundly good thing. It's an ongoing spiritual process in which we are liberated from attachments and compulsions and empowered to live and love more freely. Sometimes this letting go of old ways is painful, occasionally even devastating. Depends what we're attached to. But this is not why the night is called dark, the silent night. The darkness of the night implies nothing sinister. Only that the liberation, the freedom, the healing, the transformation takes place in hidden ways beneath our knowledge and understanding, beneath what the human mind gets. It happens, one might say, mysteriously, in secret, and beyond our conscious control. And for that reason, it can be disturbing or even scary, but in the end, it always works to our benefit. So how important is this? I'm just going to highlight briefly the 4 spiritual teachers' comments on this, and then we'll go into that model. Here's the first. This is Mary Baker Eddy. You're probably familiar with this. This is her first address in the Mother Church. 3 cardinal points must be gained before poor humanity is regenerated and Christian science is demonstrated. Why does she have to start with that one? A proper sense of sin, which is to see it as nothing, just the manifestation of ignorance of the divine. But still, she's saying, dang, that's what's got to happen first if we want regeneration. This is 107, Miscellaneous Writings. But then it moves us to repentance, which is to turn around. It's a turning of the heart. It's to rethink everything, as Paul said. And then that leads us to the understanding of good. All 3 of these are absolutely vital. She goes on to say that examine yourselves, open, and see what and how much of this sin, this missing the mark, this swerving from here to there and missing the aisle, how much of this claim you admit as valid or comply with. That can be troubling. But amazing statement here. If this is sacrilegious, excuse me, but this to me is almost Mrs. Eddy in a cheerleading outfit. The knowledge of evil that brings on repentance is the most hopeful stage of mortal mentality. The most hopeful stage of mortal mentality. The knowledge of evil, the willingness to go in because it brings on, that's not working. I'm going to turn. I'm going to find that aisle. I like hanging out with Mindy, and Chestnut's fine when we get to golf eventually, but I can open to this. The second one is from Jesus again, Gospel of Thomas. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. That's the gentle part. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. See if you can find it. That's number 70. What's within you? That begs the question, what's within you? Well, for the most part, probably some tares and probably some wheat in the human experience. Kingdom of heaven, we know, is established, it's there, but the carnal mind certainly seems to be active as well, at least in my experience. If you do not bring forth, so what we're being called to is harvest. This is how poor humanity is regenerated. It's the willingness to go into this space. But if you don't bring forth what was within you, then this stagnation destroys us. The next one is from a teacher named Adyashanti. Anybody familiar with Adyashanti? He's a California guy. He lives about 2 hours away. Some of you have read. He's written about 7 or 8 books. He's a 50-year-old guy, grew up in the Christian religion, then got into Buddhism, then read 250 books on Christian mystics. He's had so many awakenings that there literally is no longer an ego in his experience, and even a separate sense of self. So this is an enlightened being. He's a 50-year-old guy, lives right a couple hours away. And I've read some of his books and spent some time with him, and amazing man. Here's what he says. Before we actually find out what we are, we must find out what we are not. Otherwise, our assumptions will continue to contaminate the whole investigation. If your lens is dirty, then you're going to see dirt in everyone, including God. And the last one is a well-known author, Eckhart Tolle. You're probably very familiar with him. Here's what he said. One of the things. You're not your ego. So when you become aware of the ego in you, it doesn't mean you know who you are. It means you know who you're not. But it is through knowing who you're not that the greatest obstacle to truly knowing yourself is removed. And it's not that you have to spend your entire life figuring what you're not. Just go to some place where there's a little tension. That's what's calling you. That's how you know where you need to go into. So what I'd like to illustrate here is just this a model, and this is the generic one. You have it on the other page, but this is just the generic one here that tees it up. And it's a model for how our thinking works. And I'm going to illustrate this in 3 different ways in our talks over the next few days, because to me it really gives a spectrum or a path, a tapestry, if you will, a context that Maddie was talking about in a big way, and Helen as well. So we each have this lens of belief through which we look out. And what creates our belief, and your belief is what you think is real and true. So what creates that is our sense of ourself, our self-concept. And our self-concept is primarily made up of our belief in our worth, our capabilities, and purpose. Do we make a difference? So these are the 3 dominant guiding beliefs that make up one's self-image or one's concept of oneself. Am I worthy? Do I have worth? Am I capable of dealing with life, of doing what I need to do, making a living, having a relationship, etc.? And the sense of purpose. Do I make a difference? Would anybody care if I was here or not? Well, what happens is those are forming the lens through which we view things, and then we just form perceptions. You look out through that belief system, that set of beliefs, and you perceive, oh, I can do this. Oh, no, I'm not sure I can do this. And then through those perceptions, you take action. And then the action, obviously, bring about results. And then we get results, and we look at it, and we go, what just happened there? So we evaluate a little bit. And this goes round and round like a self-fulfilling prophecy over and over and over again, just lightning speed. Experiences come to us, thoughts come to us, ideas come to us. We filter it through the lens of our self-concept, and we form perceptions, judgment, non-judgment, whatever they are, right, wrong, all kinds of things. We then take actions from that. Results occur, and we then evaluate it. And the way we evaluate becomes literally another experience, and that's why it just keeps going round and round. So today, what we're going to briefly just touch on, and then before lunch, is what happens if this is based in the ego. Tomorrow, we'll move it into more healthy spaces. So for a day, you get to sit with the ego, but it's worth it. So check this out. This is where it starts on your sheet. I need my little, here it is. So here we call it the personal atrophy cycle. And atrophy simply means something that, like a plant that is wilting. When something wilts, it atrophies, it dies. It's basically a death spiral. And so what happens is, here, our beliefs are based in incompleteness, not enoughness, if only I couldness, I wish I wasn'tness. There's a fundamental belief that you are not complete. But you will be if you get blank. So it's conditional. So what starts to happen is, well, this is what Abraham Maslow called deficiency motivation. When you are based in incompleteness, when your sense of life and self is incomplete, what happens is then you walk around feeling like deficient, and so your motivation is to fix yourself, to get better. I'm broken and I need to be fixed, or I'm just not worthy, and somehow I need to find my worth, and I can't. I've been looking everywhere. It's not in my bag. I thought my wife was going to give it to me, but that didn't work. And not kids, no, they haven't done it either. I'm waiting for Dick. He can't do it. So I'm just looking everywhere, and so every relationship that I'm involved in, I'm feeling a little bit deficient. So the challenge with that is, look what happens. There's a focus on yourself, not the activity or the others. It's all like, oh, how am I looking? How am I coming across? It's all about me. I can't completely listen and be present with you 100% because I'm so concerned that I'm incomplete, that I'm deficient. If your hand's on the air, just poke the person because they're sleeping. Because this is everywhere. This is rampant. This is like in the culture. This is what's going on. So here's what happens. Here's the way this shows up. Whoops. This is how it shows up. It actually becomes a disempowering self-concept. It makes you feel like you can't do stuff. It's a weight. It's a burden. Because you feel like I have no worth. Even stronger, I'm worthless. And I'm just not capable of dealing with relationships or with life or with this job or with cold weather or whatever you want to identify it with. I have no worth. I'm not capable, and frankly, I don't make a difference. Nobody'd care if I left. What the heck? Imagine, you may not have to imagine, but imagine all three of those every day breathing that smog in. And this is all based on incompleteness. Well, when we breathe that in, that colors our lens hugely. And so what we end up with is perceptions of fear, anxiety, doubt. Not sure if I can handle this. A little scary. And so that's going to make you super tentative. So those feelings stimulate and drive your actions. So it really becomes, that says SR at the bottom or on your sheet. That means stimulus response. It means the stimulus comes and boom, we got to respond. We don't even think. Somebody cuts you off in the car and you scream at them. You just, whatever. There's just a stimulus. Anger comes and you blow up. Whoa, jeez, I shouldn't have done that. And then there's this whole space because you're driven by this belief system. This is huge. In the atrophy cycle, results are everything. That is all I'm concerned about, is what's happening out there and all the results. How do I look? What's going on? What's my bank account? It's all about results. I'm trying to fix everything because I feel deficient, and so I'm living life trying to fix it, and it's all about getting the results. Well, the challenge with that is when we start to evaluate, we evaluate through attachment to the results. What we end up thinking is that I am my results, which is awesome when I do well. Hey, I am my results. Check it out. You like my shirt? I bought a nice shirt. So I am my results. But when we get negative results, it's like, no, don't give me any feedback. We will absolutely run from any feedback because it might be negative. And that might reinforce that actually I am deficient. Bummer. So I don't want to look. I don't want to be troubled. I'll go read a book. Or whatever I'll do just to avoid this space. Well, what ends up happening is there's this huge space of self-judgment that we live in, and that becomes yet another experience that we filter through. And so day after day, moment after moment, we're getting this self-judgment. And then judging others as well. This is just applying to ourselves, but the same thing applying with others. So, somebody invites you to teach Sunday school, and you're in the atrophy cycle. That's the experience, and here it comes. And so you're filtering it through incompleteness. I'm not capable, I'm not worthy. It's like, oh, I tried that once. It wasn't a good experience. It was like, it wasn't really. I was so embarrassed. I didn't know what to say. I tried, but it didn't work. I'm not thinking I'm really capable. So what are the perceptions there? Anxiety, fear. What actions are taken? You either go in there petrified, or you go, no, not for me. I know they're great kids, and I know it's important, and I know we're supposed to do it, but it's not happening. And so the results are everything, and so if you didn't do it, you just walk around going, I can't believe I didn't do it again. What a wimp. It's just, I'm a church member, but I'm worthless. I can't even teach Sunday school or whatever. So this harsh evaluation, the self-judge, I realize I'm running out of time, the self-judgmental evaluation, that becomes, oh, there I did it again. You're not giving it your best, you're giving it your tentative because it's based right in here, in incompleteness. Or let's say your son or daughter never calls. I don't know if anybody can ever relate to that. Everybody, okay. So your son or daughter, you filter it through this. Okay, I have no worth, I'm not they never call. Obviously, it's because I'm not worthy. They don't love me. If they did, they'd call. Or write or something, an email, anything. It's just no. So I am dealing with this anxiety. Oh, next time I see him, should I say something? Should I not say something? I can't. So there's this fear and this anxiety. Where our actions are driven. We're a little tentative because I don't think they really care about me that much, or they're in their own space, and now I'm alone, and what's going on? Results are everything. I'm dealing with that. I'm struggling with that. And then there's this sense of evaluating and how judgmental that is. So this is just two tiny examples. My closing piece. Thank you. That's why he puts me at lunch, because he knows they'll save lunch. I hope. We will go into this, I think you can see how this illustrates that the attachments and compulsions from the dark night of the soul, from a proper sense of sin, from finding out what we are not, from bringing forth what is within you. This is the stuff that is within us, quote unquote, that we need to bring forth because it's not true. Nothing on that sheet is true. It's 100% lie. But we got to get a proper sense of that. Otherwise, we're going to, as Eddie says, we're going to become victims to it. So let me just read this last piece. Thank you. Not that I asked for forgiveness, not permission. That's my style. This, you forgive me, right? Okay. This is Pema Chodron again, and it just illustrates what we're talking about here, I think, in a beautiful way. She says the first time that she met this guy named Rinpoche, who was her teacher, was with a class of fourth graders who asked him a lot of questions about growing up in Tibet and about escaping from the Chinese communists into India. One boy asked him if he ever felt afraid. Rinpoche answered that his teacher had encouraged him to go to places like graveyards that scared him and to experiment with approaching things that he didn't like. Then he told this story about traveling with his attendants to a monastery he'd never seen before. As they neared the gates, he saw a large guard dog with huge teeth and red eyes. It was growling ferociously and struggling to get free from the chain that held it. The dog seemed desperate to attack them. As Rinpoche got closer, he could see the bluish spittle in the tongue of his mouth. They walked past the dog, keeping their distance, and entered the gate. And suddenly the chain broke and the dog rushed at them. The attendant screamed and froze in terror. Rinpoche turned and ran as fast as he could, straight at the dog. The dog was so surprised he put his tail between his legs and ran away. We can meet our match with poodle and with raging guard dog, but the interesting question is, what happens next? She goes on to say that the spiritual journey involves going beyond hope and fear, stepping into unknown territory, continually moving forward. The most important aspect of being on the spiritual path may be to just keep moving. Usually when we reach our limit, we feel exactly like Rinpoche's attendants and we freeze in terror. Our bodies freeze and so do our minds. They just get stuck in atrophy. So how do we work with our minds when we've met our match? Rather than indulge or reject, meaning deny our experience, we can somehow let the energy of the emotion, the quality of what we're feeling, pierce us to the heart, going through it. It's easier said than done, but it's a noble way to live, and to me, this is the point. It's the path of compassion, of cultivating human bravery and kind-heartedness. What if we were willing, with any tension that we're feeling in our church or anywhere else, to run at the dog, to go into that space and see what emerges? Wisdom, tenderness, compassion, kind-heartedness. We will continue to open this up over the next few days. Thank you.